Good evening, my friends, and welcome to Reasoned Live, the Darren Grimes show. I'm delighted to have your company and make your acquaintance. If it's your first time here, please do remember to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel on YouTube. It really does help get our voices out there. And boy, oh boy, without sounding too arrogant, my friends, voices like ours are needed to cut through the crap when it comes to actual common sense values being percolated throughout British life. Now, we're going to be discussing to Rafe Heydel-Mankoo later in the show about Charles's royal visit to Australia and other places. He's actually facing a Republican backlash in Australia by a senator who screamed at him in the most, undignifying way imaginable. Is it the end of the monarchy in places like Australia? Should we actually fear that? You know, you've just seen Sir Keir Starmer give away the Chagos Islands. Is this a sign of Britain retreating from the world stage? Let me know your thoughts if you've got any on that particular issue. We'll also be discussing what the panel wants to discuss in Grimes's Grotto. That'll make up the likes of Alex Armstrong, Chloe Dobbs and Younes Sadaghiani. And they won't hold back. As you'll know, if you're a viewer of this channel, they do not hold back when it comes to the issues that are going on today. Vast in number and, limited in common sense. But I want to open by giving my digest, my friends, on the fact that what we've got in this country is a British Prime Minister thinking he can wade in to American politics like he owns the place. It's his liberal way or the highway. And yes, I'm talking about Sir Keir Starmer, or Starlin you might want to call him these days, the very man whose Labour Party is meddling in US elections right in your backyard. We'll break it down like this. The Trump campaign has filed a complaint with the Federal Election Commission, actually accusing Starmer's Labour Party of election interference. And what's the evidence to that? Well, there's a now deleted post that claimed 100 Labour Party staffers were sent to the United States to campaign for Kamala Harris, the Democrat nominee. Yeah. You heard that right. Foreign nationals traipsing through battleground states trying to sway the American election. Now, the cherry on top of all of that is the fact that Labour's operatives are even offering housing to these volunteers. Now, that is a potentially illegal contribution, one that got the hair on the back of the neck of Elon Musk, the tech titan, Tesla tech titan, and of course, the owner now of the free speech platform X. But it doesn't stop there. Because when you look at the Centre for Countering Digital Hate, founded by Labour's Morgan McSweeney, if you don't know him, he's the one that's just replaced Sue Gray in number 10 Downing Street. They're now advising Kamala's campaign. What's the agenda of this group, you might ask yourself? Well, it's quite literally to kill Elon Musk's Twitter. That's what it says in one of their documents, while strengthening ties with the Biden-Harris campaign. Now, these CCHD folks have been plotting, lobbying and meeting with Democratic officials, including Senator Amy Klobuchar, to enforce digital censorship through proposed legislation. So effectively what they're saying is they want to kill free speech online and use censorship as the tool to do it, disguised in the guise of misinformation, the watchwords of the moment. Whenever you hear that, you should have your own hairs on the back of your neck stand up, because that means they're coming for you. Now, it's blatant foreign meddling. It's disgraceful, I think. We're talking about that Labour Svengali McSweeney plotting from the shadows. The same way he helped Sir Keir Starmer rise to power in the United Kingdom, he's now trying to export that playbook in the United States to keep the Democrats in power. Now think of it. Labour's been running these dark money campaigns, censoring their rivals in Britain, and now they're doing the same here with Kamala Harris. It smacks of everything that they tried to warn you that your vote for Brexit was all about. Dodgy cash, dark tactics, and underhand playing. And I think that's what's going on here. It's not just Labour, though. We've got Hollywood back in this madness too. There's an agent to Mark Ruffalo and Selena Gomez allegedly funding these campaigns by the CCHD to push censorship. They don't like what's said about these celebrities. So what we've got is Britain's Labour Party and Hollywood teaming up to decide American elections and what you can and cannot say or can and cannot hear on the internet, which is the de facto public square in 2024. So this isn't just interference, it's an attack on freedom of expression, an attack on democracy, an attack on American sovereignty as well. That's why the Trump campaign are right to complain about it. The Labour Party and their cronies attempting to manipulate American elections, regulate American and British speech, and silence American and British opposition, all in the name of keeping their green agenda, their woke policies, their censorship clamouring, all alive. Starmer is trying to reshape the US political landscape for his own benefit, just as his team did here in our country. And it doesn't take a genius to see why they're so desperate to keep Kamala Harris in power. It's all about pushing that globalist agenda, censorship, control, and silencing your voice. Any voice of dissent must be silenced. The special relationship between the United Kingdom and the United States, it's been twisted into something dark and manipulative. And I think actually the Trump campaign better not let them actually get away with it, for the good of Britain and the United States of America. Well, that's my dispatch, folks. Thank you very much for bearing with us whilst we endured some tech gremlins there at the very start. We started ever so slightly later, so I'm hoping that Rafe Heydel-Mankoo will be ever so kind as to give us 2 minutes to dissect that story and that particular issue. Again, thank you so much to everyone who is rejoining. Smash that like button, folks, because it really does help, and actually maybe it'll help remind people that we are actually live because of those tech gremlins. I'm sure it's cock up more than conspiracy. But then again, the issues we're talking about, it does seem somewhat coincidental, does it not? Right, let's get this on, shall we? Well, who do we have here? Chloe Dobbs is there in the corner. We've got Younes up there on top and Alex on top. First time for everything, Alex. And, and I think we ought to. What did you make of what I had to say, anyone? Just fire out some thoughts, whoever wants to go first on this, because I think it is a pretty big story.
No, it's definitely a very big story because Keir Starmer is trying to, because, the Labour government won here. So I feel like if Trump gets elected, it's going to be a very tough relationship between Keir Starmer and Donald Trump. And, he wants everyone to be on the left. And, this should be prosecuted because I don't think you're actually allowed to do such a thing, are you?
To actually campaign in the United States, no, it is actually
like a foreign government, like trying to help a foreign candidate. Is that allowed?
Yeah, because Elon Musk is actually saying as well that he'll go to war on this the Labour-linked campaign group set up by McSweeney, who is in number 10, took over from Sue Gray. I mean, Alex, this just all smacks of a coalition of the left, a transatlantic coalition, that is actually ganging up in order to censor our speech and our right to be a dissenting voice online.
Yeah, it's typical Keir Stalin tactics, and I think what's great about all of this is how exposed it is now. It's another dump of Twitter files, essentially, right? This is this kind of level of cabal, of collusion between two far left parties: the Democrat Party, who's become a corporatist far left, and the Labour Party, which has been sort of swinging far left for a very long time as well. So I don't think Trump's mischaracterized them whatsoever. But I think it's exposed someone like Morgan McSweeney, who was sort of seen as a new calming hand in the Cabinet Office after he'd got rid of Sue Gray, he's now at the top of the food chain. And it makes me very nervous. These sorts of people are basically running our government. They are advising our prime minister. Now, whether Keir Starmer knew anything about this, well, I wouldn't be surprised if he did, because he's the leader of the Labour Party. But it seems to me all a little bit too good to be true, doesn't it? That Morgan McSweeney, this very powerful man who used to be the director of this CDC company, whatever it's called, that seems to have this agenda to censor and shut people down, is now the chief reporting person to Keir Starmer. It's all very shocking stuff, Darren.
And you just have to look at the website, right? And you get the sense of why is it all black? Like, it just gives an air of sort of, has this been set up by Emperor Palpatine? Like, it just...
and the yellow.
And the yellow,
The yellow's like a warning. It's like, shut up. It's like something you'd stick over someone's mouth.
I really, I find it really, really quite eerie. And for no other reason than my own experiences, which is, Chloe, during the Brexit campaign, I was told that I was an asset of the Russian regime, President Putin's regime, and that actually Brexit was brought about by dark forces in Russia that were convincing people online to actually vote for Brexit. Now, of course, it was proven to be a complete and utter load of bollocks, but it actually, I think, in this argument, that was in the name of disinformation, misinformation, to rerun a referendum, a national vote over so-called threats from outside sources. Well, aren't they looking somewhat hypocritical now that they, are trying to interfere in the elections and censor the speech both here and in the United States of America?
Yeah, I mean, it is just so hypocritical. I mean, this Labour Party, from the moment they stepped into Downing Street, from day one, they have shown themselves to be hypocrites every single day. And, I just think they, and particularly Keir Starmer, are so tone deaf. I mean, Keir Starmer has this reputation amongst those on his team around him of one of his biggest weaknesses being that he thinks that he is completely immune to bad press and that it will not affect him at all. And you can definitely see that the Labour Party has not been careful at all about what they are doing. Now, this specific case here with the CCDH campaign we found out about this through a whistleblower, but just generally with their involvement with the election over there, first of all, we had that LinkedIn post from their head of operations. This wasn't just some idiot intern who's 18 and doesn't know what they're doing and made a stupid post. This is their head of operations organizing a proper trip, right? That was absolutely stupid. That got taken down. Then we find out, Guido discovered this today, we've got the Labour women's group. They are running a Labour for Kamala event. They've got Labour for Kamala badges that they've been handing out. It's so they just keep on doing this, even though you would have thought after they had the bad press before that they would stop and they'd keep quiet about the Kamala campaign, but they can't seem to stop. And then onto this organisation. Now, this organisation, as you can see, it all looks very dark what they're doing. It all looks very woke, and they have, for example, been campaigning against the Daily Wire being able to have any advertisements. So this organisation is in both the US and the UK, and as you say, set up by Morgan Sweeney, right? So this is meant to be a charity, and they're definitely not independent from government at all, because it was set up by Morgan Sweeney, who is now Keir Starmer's left-hand man. Now, we're told that when the chief of staff becomes the story, the chief of staff has to go, right? And that was why we got rid of Sue Gray. Could we be seeing this guy, Morgan Sweeney, being kicked out as well if this becomes a huge story? Who knows? Time will tell.
No chance, Chloe. No chance.
I mean, just final words to each of you. I've no idea what Younes was doing there. He was sort of picking at himself by the looks of things. I hope you're not doing anything untoward. It's not that kind of stream, Younes. This is not OnlyFans. You are not Mia Khalifa or whatever her name is. The question here is, I've long suspected that Elon Musk's X would be the first tech supergiant to actually be pursued by Brussels, by Kamala Democrat America, and by the Labour Party here in Britain. it's all coming into fruition. You know, what we've been saying for months and months and months and months and months, what I've been saying about the online bloody safety bill in this country every 2 seconds hasn't changed. And it's been used as a tool to actually clamp down on these platforms because Elon allows free speech that they don't like on these platforms. Younes?
Yeah, exactly. And, Elon Musk has now endorsed Donald Trump, and that has, and he's attacked Keir Starmer for two-tier policing and, two-tier justice system. And for obvious reasons, Keir Starmer hates Elon Musk. And, the people that try to censor you are never the good guys. So if Keir Starmer is trying to censor Twitter, take down Twitter, stop Daily Wire from advertising, it just shows you that he's a tyrant. Because at the end of the day, if your arguments are strong enough, then why are you trying to censor other people? Just let other people speak. And if your arguments are strong enough, the people will vote for you. But they know that Donald Trump is on his way to win. He's winning 7 out of the 7 swing states. And recently, I looked at the polls, like the bet makers have put him on 60% chance of winning against Kamala Harris 40%. So he's now the red hot favorite. And now obviously Keir Starmer is panicking because he knows that if Donald Trump comes and, if Elon Musk is on his cabinet, then he's going to have a very hard time for the next 4 or 5 years.
Oh, I mean, that'll just be based.
Yeah.
Alex?
Yeah, look, I think this is not a surprise. As you said, Darren, some of us have been saying this for a really long time. We know they are after freedom of speech. They have managed to control every other social platform, Facebook, and all of its subsidiary companies, like Instagram, also completely locked down. Twitter, I just posted today that one of my comments got flagged because I wrote the word pathetic. It's on my Twitter account. Go look.
On TikTok.
Look. I just... Yeah, a TikTok post I put up, it said the word pathetic. I can't remember what the video, what I was posting about, but that got flagged, right? Incredible. I've actually flagged Nazi propaganda on TikTok before, and they've gone, your report was not verified. So they control every other social media platform apart from X, and they don't like Elon Musk because he goes against the standard bearing of their censorship flag. So I don't trust the American establishment at the moment. I have very, very little trust. If Trump doesn't win, I think we are in big trouble.
Yeah. Chloe?
Yeah, I mean, just echoing Alex's words, I think this is very, very scary for free speech. Yeah. This campaign group, this is not run by, some nobodies. As we've said, Morgan McSweeney, who is now right next to Keir Starmer, if he says we need to close down Twitter in this country, there's a good chance that he'll be able to push Keir Starmer into doing so. I mean, we were all terrified enough after the riots, what happened with the free speech there. And, very sadly, we've had Peter Lynch now die in prison, which has sort of brought that back up. And, now we've really seen, if you didn't see Labour's true colours, then you've now seen it. They really do not like free speech. And if we've got both the US and the UK potentially taking down Twitter with this collusion with Kamala Harris, I mean, where the hell are we going to go? Because I've always thought I'll escape to America if Britain loses its free speech.
Yeah, well, indeed. I mean, but things are that if you are betting people out there, then the betting market seems to think that there is going to be a Trump victory, and I live in hope that there will.
I just can't see how she wins. I can't. I cannot see how she wins. It'd be insane.
Of course it would be, I just cannot think what would possess the American people to think that she's a more viable candidate than President Trump. But we'll see, and we'll be here to chronicle it all. But thank you to everyone who has found us as well, because as the Grotto will be aware, there were some tech gremlins that got hold of us. I think Sir Keir Starmer's trying to shut us down already. That must be it. And not my incompetence. That's what I'm going to tell myself. Right. Wait there, because, my friends, it's time to bring on our guest of the night, who is a man that I have had on GB News once or twice before, many times, really. And I always, annoyingly, seem to end up with him on the end of the show. So I only get like 4 minutes to bloody speak to him when I want to hear what he's got to say, because he's got an encyclopedic mind on history. He's got an encyclopedic mind on the fact of the defeating this pernicious ideology that we've just been discussing here today, but then on the royal family as well, and they're facing their own troubles. So, my friends, I'll be back with you in just a moment, but now, though, it is time for Rafe Heydel-Mankoo. Rafe, thank you very much for joining me. How are you doing?
Doing very well. Glad to have more than 3 or 4 minutes to speak with you on.
I know, it's excellent,
so
isn't it?
Great.
Hopefully no one from GB News is listening to this, Rafe, because they'll be very annoyed that I said that. But listen, it's the way in which we're going at the moment, the whole idea of the British state, of British history, of the monarchy, of course, being a key pillar of the British state, that's all pretty much frowned upon at the moment. And if you saw the Republican debates actually coming through to the fore in Australia, who, as a Western nation, has its same struggles with those debates in their country as we do here, especially with younger generations. But this is what King Charles actually had to endure whilst he was out there last week. So even the Express, Rafe, are saying that 14 countries abandoning the monarchy for republicanism, posting that as if, the Australia is going to be the next one to go. Now, Australians that I've actually spoken to say that this is a total load of nonsense, and that actually they don't suspect Australia to do that anytime soon, if at all, especially given how popular the Prince and Princess of Wales are. So I'm just wondering what feeling you're getting, because there was also that awful heckling incident in which one of the senators in Australia heckled the king. Do you see a growing movement for republicanism across the former British overseas territories?
Quite the opposite, actually. Republicanism has been the biggest political failure of modern times. For the last few years, we had about a third of Australians wanted to become a republic tomorrow. Another third wanted to keep the monarchy forever. And the remainder either didn't care or wanted to kick the issue down the road. And we were told for the last 20 years, when Queen Elizabeth II dies, inevitably Australia will become a republic. Well, I'm afraid to tell them that support for the monarchy has increased since Her late Majesty's sad death. So now we have 45% rather than a third of Australians saying that they do not want to become a republic. More Australians are proud of the monarchy than are ashamed of it. More think it's a good thing than a bad thing, and a majority of Australians have a positive attitude to the monarchy. And most interestingly, 75% of Australians do not believe that Australia will become a republic in their own lifetimes. To put it in another way, support for the monarchy in Australia is higher now than it was in 1999 when they had a referendum on the subject. It's at the highest level since 1979. So people like Graham Smith, the Australian-born head of the Republic Organisation over here, he went to Australia and there he was, a lone man flying his awful yellow jaundiced flag. And yet there was a sea of 10,000 people who had come out to see the royal family. The Republicans were calling this a farewell tour. I think we can call it a victory tour, actually.
Well, Rafe, one question that I always get from viewers is saying that actually the problem with the monarchy as it stands is the politics of His Majesty the King. As someone that is a keen environmentalist, actually the King cannot become the emblem or the figurehead, for want of a better word, of movement which will make the British people both colder and poorer. How do you sort of square that up? Do you just make the argument that actually the monarchy, the institution, is bigger than the person that wears the crown?
Yeah, so two things here. Firstly, you're quite right. So the monarchy, the crown, is more than just the king. The crown is the royal family. The crown is the governor generals and all of the Commonwealth realms. The crown, in fact, is the source of authority for all of our legal system and our police and our army and everything else. So it's more than just one person. And look, we can disagree with the king on his views. Look, he was a very active man as Prince of Wales, but he's not a stupid man. He knows full well that as king, he can't be the activist he was as Prince of Wales. And so he's certainly modified and restrained himself as king. But I have issues with a lot of the position that His Majesty takes. It's worth pointing out, however, that His Majesty is actually in tune with the British public on this. And all of the polling shows actually that the King's views are shared by the majority of the British public. They may not be our views necessarily on all issues, but he actually is. And in fact, it's one of the reasons why it was so unfair for that obnoxious, hideous woman, Lydia Thorpe in Australia, the most ludicrous and absurd politician in the Commonwealth, to do what she did when she heckled him in Parliament, because we've never had a sovereign, a member of the royal family, who has been so sympathetic to the indigenous peoples, from the Maori in New Zealand to the Aborigines to the Native Americans in Canada. And so to accuse him of all these vile, the calumnies as she did, I think was so unfair, because he is actually the greatest friend of the Aboriginal peoples.
Yeah, indeed. What could she possibly disagree with him on? There seem to be a whole host of issues in which they're perfectly aligned. But the next question I want to put to you, Rafe, is one that we've heard before, and one that's been coming to the fore of conversations for many years now, but we've never had a foreign secretary who seems broadly supportive of the aims and objectives of the activists, what I would call race-baiting activists, who push these narratives. And you know exactly what I'm talking about, Rafe, because I'm talking about this. Now, Keir Starmer has today warned of endless rows if Commonwealth members push reparation claims. Now, the Prime Minister said that he would rather roll up his sleeves and work with them on current future-facing challenges than spend a lot of time on the past. And that was him there speaking to reporters on a flight to the gathering of Commonwealth leaders in Samoa. Now, the fact of the matter here, Rafe, is that we've never had a government more broadly supportive, or who have at least been historically supportive of these kinds of claims. How worried should we be about this?
Well, we should be worried to a degree. Remember, this is a government, as you said, that is fundamentally at its soul anti-British. It's ashamed of our past, it's embarrassed of our past, rather than celebrating the fact that Britain created the modern world. Britain, through the British Empire, lifted more people out of poverty than any other country in history. But of course, this is a Prime Minister who's taking down portraits of our greatest heroes, from the Thatcher to Elizabeth I, Sir Walter Raleigh, Gladstone, even William Shakespeare now has come down. But of course, He knows full well that it is political suicide for him to actually support reparations, because, despite their great majority in a huge number of seats, the reform is yet nipping at its rear. And if Labour was ever to go down the reparations path, you would see reform take over Labour's lead in many of those constituencies, and there will be a great sea change in Labour's fortunes, despite what they think. People need to remind David Mastermind Lammy that being foreign secretary doesn't mean you have to be foreign. I think he's got confused with the name foreign secretary. He's not Caribbean. He's supposed to be British, advancing British interests as foreign secretary, not advancing the interests of his ancestors and forebears. And in fact, he comes from Guyana, and actually the period when his family were alleged to have been enslaved was done by the Dutch, not by the British anyway. So if he does have the grievance, he should take it over to the Netherlands and give Wilders rather than having it with us.
Well, good luck with that.
Britain doesn't owe... Yeah, exactly. I'd like to see that discussion.
Yeah, I would too.
Britain doesn't owe a single penny to anybody in the world in terms of reparations. Let that be clear. We spent a sum equivalent to £20 billion today, 20 million at the time, 43% of the entire budget of 1833, freeing the slaves. We then spent 2% of GDP, a sum equivalent to our entire modern defense budget, on the West Africa Squadron, which is how we enforced an end to the slave trade, seizing foreign ships, and also importantly, compelling the Africans to stop enslaving other Africans. Africans were the ones most opposed to the end of the slave trade. And in fact, there were more Africans held in bondage by other Africans than were ever transported across the Atlantic. Of course, we never hear that. But I think this was the first time in human history that a power had made itself deliberately poorer in order to advance the moral good. And I think we should all be proud of that. And instead of Sadiq Khan erecting a monument to slavery in London, there should be a monument to the West Africa Squadron, celebrating the fact that despite slavery being universal, the British were unique because that missionary Anglican zeal went through us in the 19th century and made us realize that all people are equal and should be liberated.
What do you think, Rafe, the ultimate end destination is if we continue to allow much of our academic output and much of our educational system, I'm talking early years, not just academia, to be intoxicated by the fumes of a really repugnant and I think, frankly, racist attitude that says that Britain is a unique evil to the world, the British Empire was a unique evil to the world, and raise a generation, rear a generation off of the teat of a really divisive form of politics.
Yeah, let's be clear here. We have the most radically left-wing youth in history. We have never seen anything like this before. And for the first time in history, the youth are not becoming more conservative as they get older. It used to be said that if you're not a liberal at 25, you have no heart. If you're not a conservative at 35, you have no brain. Well, that brain has gone because, of course, capitalism has failed them. They can't get on the housing ladder. They don't have pensions. They don't have job security. So for many reasons, they're leaning left. But the rise of left-wing youth mirrors the rise of the left-wing teaching profession and the left-wing in academia. When I was in the secondary school, we had a fairly good balance. In fact, it might have leaned slightly to the right. But now 90% of teachers vote for left-wing parties, and children learn by osmosis. And so, for example, the number one issue, according to the youth of Britain, isn't climate change, it's racism. They think racism is the number one issue in this country, even though Britain is the world's third least racist nation. So you're quite right. We have a massive issue in this country, and we cannot keep talking about university as being the issue. As Aristotle said, give me a boy of 7 and I will show you the man. It's in your childhood that these attitudes and beliefs and values are set. We really need to tackle the schools, and we need to tackle teacher training, the profession. This is where the rot sets in. If we want to save Western civilization, if we want to save Britain, we need to actually win the battle for young minds. And unfortunately, for the last 30 years, departments of education at universities have taken over teacher training. I call them the woke madrasas. This is where teachers are being indoctrinated into all of this. It needs to start there. University is too late. As I like to say, if the hair is blue, there's nothing you can do. You need to get them.
I like that. Rafe, have you ever considered a career in politics? Have you ever considered standing for Parliament?
No party would allow it.
I think you're wrong. Listen, you should see my comment section right now. They love you. They absolutely love you. We should make you some form of, you advise what the curriculum should say about British history, because it would be a damn sight better than the absolute gruel that kids are being force-fed these days.
I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, the problem is if you become a politician, you have to toe the party line, and I could never do that. I want to be a free spirit and talk openly, and I could never say things that I don't believe in. But something needs to be done. And it's quite ironic that in many ways, the EU and Europe are becoming more aware and alert to all of this sort of stuff from immigration onwards than we are here. And it seems often as if it's at the moment, whether you believe him or not, in many ways, Robert Jenrick is the only one talking sense in this country, when you even have, EU leaders now sounding more conservative and more right-wing even than Reform UK.
Well, yeah. How the tables have turned, eh? The progressives. I wonder if Sir Keir Starmer is going to be calling Brussels far right any moment now. But Rafe, can I end by asking you about that story that we've been talking about today, which is the case of Chris Kaba. Now, one MP stood up in Parliament and she said that the media was guilty of racist tropes in speaking about Mr. Kaba. Now, you've just mentioned there that Britain is not a racist country. Do you think that the British press are racist?
I think the British press are anti-white, so they are racist on that level. It's quite clear. I mean, we know that for a fact because if this had been a white person who had been shot in this manner, this wouldn't be a news story at all. It would be tomorrow. It would have been last week's fish and chip paper, essentially. There is clearly racism in this country, and it's targeted against white people. I mean, for example, you see this through all strata in society. You know, whenever the police or councils come out with these anti-grooming gang videos, for example, they always have white men as being actually the perpetrators of all of this. There's a concerted effort to try to cast, for some reason, the white working class particularly as being the source of all evil, hence this new myth about the rise of the so-called far right. And yet, of course, we know that the greatest threats to our culture aren't coming from the indigenous white population. They're coming from people who are coming from culturally incompatible nations. And yet all of that is swept under the rug. And all of the real issues that are facing this country, which we can quite clearly see what the reasons are for that, are being placed upon the shoulders of the most disadvantaged people in our society, white working class boys, for example, who we know are the most disadvantaged. And yet, of course, that's the media narrative has to be something contrary to that, because we have to understand that all of our institutions have been captured. The long march through the institutions is an Anglosphere phenomenon. The woke mind virus, which started in America, is transmitted through the English language. That's why it's most prevalent in the Anglosphere and in Scandinavia, where everyone is also bilingual. And it's only by trying to either to reverse the long march through the institutions, or ideally for the right to actually now build our own institutions, our own private colleges, as they've done in America with Hillsdale and so forth, but also with media outlets like yours. This is where I think that more and more decent British people are turning to, because you can no longer trust the establishment media. I mean, for example, the BBC put out that message about Chris Kaba having traumatized black communities now with that verdict. Well, the BBC were then fact-checked on that by Twitter's community notes, and the BBC then turned off their comments on the tweet, and they turned off their comments on the Facebook post. And if the BBC is turning off tweets and responses, you know that something has fundamentally changed in what we once called the mainstream media.
Exactly. And that's exactly why they're coming for X. That's exactly why they are seeking to regulate platforms like YouTube to actually kick off so-called disinformation. Well, I tell you what, if the BBC gets a free pass all of the time and they are guilty purveyors of this so-called disinformation, how about you just let us have free speech and actually come to conclusions for ourselves through argument, debate and the advancement of thought and ideas? They're just scared, Rafe, right? They fear the new media coming to the fore and actually challenging them and challenging the cosy liberal consensus. And I think that can't come soon enough. But Rafe, listen, thank you very much for your time today. And we'll have to get you back on because they're going crazy in the chat box. Rafe Heydel-Mankoo, they'll follow you on X. It's Rafe. What's your handle, Rafe? Remind me.
It's RAFHM. Very simple.
Very, very simple. All right, Rafe. Cheers very much for your company. I'll see you
Pleasure.
soon.
Thanks so much, Darren. Cheerio.
Right, I'm once again joined by Younes, Alex and Chloe. I think you'll agree that that was very, very good. I love Rafe. He's a phenomenal speaker and thinker. Now, Alex, let's talk about what you wanted to talk about. And I'm going to allow you to introduce the topic via this video, the video that I just mentioned with Rafe of Kim Johnson MP, who is a Scouser obviously up in the Liverpool area. And she had this to say on the Chris Kaba case.
I'd also like to send my condolences to the family, friends and loved ones of Chris Kaba, particularly this week while the media are using racist gang tropes to justify the killing of Chris Kaba. 1,900 people have died in police custody since 1990. 1990. And I would say that the police do have protections. You know, we know that our black communities are over-policed and under-supported. So can the Home Secretary give us assurances that we and our communities are kept safe and that extra protections are not given to the police because they already have the protections they need?
I mean, I don't know about you, but I just found that intervention absolutely extraordinary. And there's one by our good friend Diane Abbott on the same issue. But, you know, the protections for police, let's not give the police any more protections. Sorry, what? This man, Martin Blake, Sergeant Martin Blake, has had his name dragged through the press. He's had a court case. He's potentially risking losing his job now, all because he did his damn job.
Yeah, it's completely insane. Can I just first of all start by saying I think Rafe is absolutely wonderful, by the way. I've met him a few times in the green room at GB News, such an intelligent man. And thankfully he started this off quite nicely for me. We were talking about someone like Chris Carber. It's quite shocking seeing what went down in Parliament today. I'm glad you showed that video, Darren. And of course, I encourage everyone to go watch Diane Abacus's statement as well. But, you know, I will praise Yvette Cooper today. For the first time, I think I'm going to praise this Labour government because she was trying to put forward plans that would, you know, keep these firearm officers safe, keep them safe from retaliation. And there's a bounty on Martin Blake's head now by gangs across London. They're saying the first person to kill him, I think, is up to £10,000 or something like that. Crazy. We should be protecting our officers. And this goes back, actually, slightly further into this case, because when Chris Carber's case, the murder trial against Martin Blake was acquitted and he was found innocent, Chris Carber's mother actually pushed for the officer's name to be released. But not only did she push for his name to be released, but she pushed for her son's criminal background to be kept a secret. It's absolutely intolerable to me to think that this mother, a woman who of course has lost her son at a human level, would think that it would be okay for this police officer who was just doing his job and was acquitted in only 3 hours, which is incredible speed for a jury to act on, by the way, and to then have the mother go, no, his criminal background must never be known to the public. It seems to a lot of people that she wants to milk it and portray Chris Carber to be something that he absolutely is not. The man is a criminal. Now, let's not forget that the day he was unfortunately killed, the police found gunpowder on the sleeve of his jumper. He was driving a car suspected of being in the drive-by shooting just days before. And of course, now all the clips have emerged of Chris Carber at a club shooting one of his gang rivals there twice in public. That any of those bullets could have hit an innocent member of the public, by the way. Cared little to zero care about that. And we've still, on top of all of that, we've still had BLM and these deranged, disgraced societies come forward and say he needs justice. Well, I tell you what, justice was served the day that Martin Blake fired that weapon. I don't want these criminals on our street. I have no sympathy for Chris Carber and the situation he was in. He was not an innocent man. He could have surrendered at any point in time. And I'm just disgusted that the far left in our country think that this is a hill to die on. If anything, it's exposed them for what they are, which is grifters trying to get money and provoke the British public into a race war at this point.
Yeah, well, very well said, Alex. A round of applause. The fact of the matter is, I mean, Rest Within on YouTube says the police have the worst job, the danger of getting stabbed at work. And then you've got Kim Johnson there saying what she just said, but then you've also got Diane Abbott saying this, Younes.
Unhappiness and even riots. One death that comes to mind is that in 1985 of Cynthia Jarrett, who died of a heart attack when 4 policemen burst into her house. Her death triggered the Broadwater Farm riots. So does the Home Secretary accept that nothing could be more damaging for police-community relations than if the idea took hold that in some way the police were above the law?
Well, Younes, no one is suggesting that the police are above the law, but what they are suggesting is that if you are a marksman for the Metropolitan Police and you put yourself in harm's way every single time that you go out onto the streets, and you've got a gang member who refuses to make a hard stop and instead seeks to ram through it, that officer should then expect their life to be turned upside down when he is forced to use his weapon and fire one single shot. You know, this was no rampage with a firearm. This was one single shot as the bloke sought to ram the convoy of police officers. So where do we draw the line here? Because it strikes me from Kim Johnson to Diane Abbott, to BLM, there are race-baiting activists seeking to actually ensure that the police's lives are made an absolute bloody misery, even seeking to bring out incidents that took place in the bloody 1980s.
Always the young black men that are the victims, and somehow the police only targets young black innocent men that have no blame, and the police just picks on them, and we have a racist police that loves to kill young black men. But this is not true. As you said, the police officer was attacked and then he killed him by one shot. We also saw it recently in a case in America, in a case of Sidney Wilson, that attacked a police officer with a knife, slashed him on many occasions, and then the police officer was forced to kill her, sorry. And at first that was also a racially motivated killing, and then once the body cam footage was released, we realized that no, it wasn't. The police officer's life was in danger. Okay, and I've always said this, even throughout the BLM protests. I really think Black Lives Matter is a scam. It's race baiting, it's race hustlers that try to basically make something out of nothing and pretend they are the victims. But in reality, a black Harvard professor proved that black people are actually killed at a lesser rate than white people in America, unarmed black people. Okay, and he's a black Harvard professor. And then the ironic thing is that after he published his findings, he had to live under police protection because the black community had sent him death threats. So if you just want to talk about irony, there's nothing more ironic than that. And as I said, I just hate identity politics, and Diane Abbott are the queen of identity politics. She started her career through identity politics, and the reason why she's still in this Labour government is because of identity politics.
Yeah, well, she's not in government, thank God, but she was going to be Home Secretary under Jeremy Corbyn. I mean, can you bloody well imagine that? But Chloe, 80 says it's only black that they actually report on, and that's probably true, is it not? Because the Kaba story has been given this almighty press coverage because of the fact that it was a young black man that was killed. But what about, if the police were to shoot, or all the horrible things that have happened that you've covered on Reason with the case of a suicide of one of the guys that actually was jailed, banged up for shouting at police officers. I mean, there are injustices happening all over the place, but because they're not black, they don't get coverage. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely a fair comment. If this was a white guy, you definitely would not be seeing anywhere near the same amount of coverage. And what scares me with the amount of coverage that this is getting is that other police officers are going to look at this and they're going to see how the life of this police officer was completely ruined. And, even though he's been found innocent now, sounds like everyone's out to get him and thinks, the judge was just wrong, and he's probably going to basically have to live in hiding now, worried of himself having his life taken on the streets because of the mob coming against him. I think other police are going to look at this and think, I'm too scared to arrest a black man. I'm too scared to get involved if someone is not white. And as someone who lives in London, I see the streets getting less and less safe. And whenever I go out anywhere central in London, you see the gangs walking around all with their hoodies up and all, they may be more interested in hurting each other than hurting normal members of the public. But, it's pretty unnerving when you see literal gangs just walking around freely and nobody's doing anything about it. And I think that problem is going to get worse. We're going to see crime going up in the capital, and people of all different colours are going to lose their lives. It's not just phone thefts in the capital as a consequence. So this is very, very concerning. And also, just on your point, Darren, about the mother insisting that this guy's record is not released, it is so important that this record is not released, because just like how with the Southport stabbings, there was this void because we didn't have information about who the stabber was, we then had riots. You'll see the same situation here. If people don't realise that this is a guy who was a prolific gang member who shot other people, this is not a nice guy. This is not I can't remember the MP's comments, but it was something like valued member of the community.
Yeah, Kim
right?
Johnson and Diane Abbott,
If they don't realise that, they are all going to come out in droves to protest and, maybe potentially riot about this killing. And that is very, very concerning to me.
I think they'd quite like that, to be honest. I think anything to continue the grift, that's what they ultimately want. The fact of the matter is, what we saw in the clips that were released after the court case in which Sergeant Martin Blake was cleared was a video of Kaba actually taking a gun in a nightclub and shooting someone and following them out on the street to shoot them some more. The idea of that kind of gang warfare going on in Britain, why does that not get any damnation from the members of the parliamentary Labour cabal? Why actually is it exclusively reserved for a white officer who did his job? That's the I can't make heads or tails of it, only other than to say that actually, should we not argue that they have some racial biases going on here? Because you can damn bet your bottom dollar that if it was a white gang member that was shot like this, they wouldn't be bleeding heart liberals in the parliamentary chamber over this.
Just one more point on the gangs there. Remember, I can't remember, it was late last year or something like that, we had the Metropolitan Police decide that they were going to scrap their gang matrix with all the data that they have on gang members in London, that they were going to scrap it, mostly because of the fact that they thought that black people were overrepresented in the matrix, i.e. there were more black people than white people listed as gang members on it, and it was presumed that this was just because of institutional racism or something, right? The Metropolitan Police scrapping that up, which is vital data, important for keeping our streets safe, because apparently we're all racist, is just bonkers, and this country is going to get a heck of a lot more unsafe if this kind of BS continues.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Chloe. Very well said. Younes, you had a story coming to us from the United States of America. Now, viewers might remember that there was a leak of documents that actually showed that the Israelis were planning an attack on Iran. And the attack on Iran was focusing on, I think it was energy infrastructure as well as military infrastructure. Now, this leak reportedly has come from, or at least is suspected to have come from a director of a bureau that is of Iranian origin. It's called the Sky News in Arabic network, quoted by a senior official in the US Department of Defense who stated that she was suspected of leaking the documents about an attack in Iran. Are you of the view that this goes to show that when it comes to, should we suspect everyone, basically, that is in these positions who might get hold of these kinds of documents? Because the state of Iran would love to get their mitts on them, surely. Oh, Younes, muted there. Hang on, Younes, I've muted for some reason.
So this case shows that the Democratic Party, and especially the Biden administration, is infiltrated, because she was actually flagged a few years ago during the Mahsa Amini protests by some Iranian people, saying she shouldn't be in the position she is in, because basically what she's doing, she's trying to leak information to the Islamic Republic and try to stop the protests outside of Iran. So she's actually quite famous already within the Iranian community that hate the Islamic Republic. And, we've been saying about her that, she's could be a spy, and she was actually flagged a few times. But then the Biden administration didn't remove her from her position. And why this is significant is because Israel is almost done with Hamas and they're almost done with Hezbollah. So the next target for them was Iran. And it wasn't just the energy sectors or the nuclear facilities, it was the heads of state. They were going to attack the houses of the heads of state. And they knew their addresses, they knew exactly where they lived. And then she leaked that information. And because she leaked that information, now all those people that Israel was going to assassinate have now evacuated those buildings. So now it's going to be a much harder job for Israel to do it.
Yeah.
And one more thing I want to say about this. Let's not forget that Joe Biden was working with President Carter under his administration. So he is actually one of the people that caused the revolution in Iran. So I wouldn't put it beyond the realms of possibility that someone that like Joe Biden wants the Islamic Republic of Iran to stay. And also he's the one that always tries to appease Iran. He's the one that worked with the Obama administration to get the nuclear deal and gave them $150 billion worth of cash. I think $6 billion worth of cash and $150 billion worth of frozen assets back to them. And then guess what the Iranian government done with that money? They sent that money to Yemen to strengthen the Houthis. They expanded their operations in Iraq and in Syria with Qasem Soleimani. And, at some point they were controlling half of Iraq until Trump killed Soleimani. So the Democratic Party has been the cause for instability in the Middle East. They caused all these revolutions, such as the 1979 one. They don't want, Kamala Harris the other day was saying, don't go to Rafah, don't go to Rafah. And guess where Yahya Sinwar was? In Rafah. They're saying don't attack south of Lebanon. So they try to pretend to be the good guys, the kind ones, the anti-war ones, but then their policies actually leads to more instability and more war long term.
Yeah, and Arena there commented about another suspect, but also said that she, on screen now, Ariane Tabatabai, how do I say that? That's it. Well done. Arena says she was suspected to be a spy since last year, and she was never revoked of her clearance. I mean, that is just a damn disgrace as far as security is concerned. So thank you, Younes, for bringing that one to us. Chloe, one story that you pointed out that you would like to discuss is about what happened to a GB News presenter, I nearly said a journalist, called Sophie Reaper when she was outside of a prison, because of course yesterday was the day in which Sir Keir Starmer allowed out a load of convicts. It's such a shame that we've had to fill our prisons full of those that waved flags or shouted things or posted mean tweets, and actually we've had to let out all of these gang members. Isn't it such a crying shame? But Sir Keir Starmer has our best interests at heart, of course. And they let out this fella. Before I play the video from GB News, Chloe, this is just to give viewers a sort of taste of the kind of person that's now out on our streets early.
Last week there was a number of intelligence reports coming in saying that this particular group were going to turn up at school to target young children, throw acid in their face, threaten them. We know that they've been following some of the kids off at some of the school gates. We've had to put extra resources in and around that, covert and overt, to try and manage that risk.
The team believe that gang member Isaac Donker is recruiting young teenagers to carry out violence.
We are doing proactive investigations around Isaac Donker. So we know he's very active in terms of rap videos and Snapchat.
Donker is a key player in the gang and is well known as a drill artist.
So this fella is out, and he posted lyrics.
Mom kept shedding tears. Somebody tell her I don't give a fuck that her son ain't here.
I was laughing when I saw that pic of her mum just bury her kid, and he got out, and he's now a free man. And then, as you say, to give another flavour of the kind of person that's come out early.
Shouting out of windows, playing rap music loudly. There was also a moment where one group of men
Turn that up.
shouted over to me and felt it was appropriate to ask for me to flash them. So, as I say, a story of two sides here today, and I imagine that will be a similar situation across the country today as those 1,100 prisoners are released as part of the government's early release scheme.
I'm so sorry that happened to you. That sounds like an appalling thing. These people, presumably some of the friends of those who've been released from prison, but also...
Anyway, it gives you a flavour of the kind of fella that we're talking about. Fact of the matter is, Chloe, that the prisons are full, but you've just put, 2,000 people in there after the so-called riots? I mean, could you not have gotten rid of them and kept these horrible bastards inside?
I mean... Yeah, I'm not sure the exact figure, but something like that. So we just had, I think either on the day or shortly before or shortly after, we saw that Peter Lynch, one of the people who was imprisoned after the Rotherham hotel migrant, after he sadly passed away in prison, almost definitely from suicide. Yeah. We're seeing, I've seen this video, and that just really frustrated me, is we're letting people out of prison who clearly have not been rehabilitated. If the first thing they do when they're let out the prison gates is ask a female journalist to flash them, and as you say, Darren, that car looked quite expensive. I bet that wasn't paid for with money made legally. I can bet you that. And you know, every time I bring up this about the prison release, some lefty says to me, "Oh, don't be silly. They're not actually letting people that are that bad out of there. You're just, you're exaggerating it." But, you've just shown us that video there. Someone who was in prison for kidnap and torture.
Yeah.
Released early. I don't want these people on the streets, and I do not give Labour the benefit of the doubt that they think they are owed because it's the Tories' fault that they didn't build enough prisons, when they are the ones putting people like Peter Lynch in prison. Now, you might disagree with the fact that that guy was at a riot, involved with a riot, but actually, if you look at why he was put in prison, it wasn't because he beat up a police officer, threw a firework them or something. He shouted... and, bearing in mind, this is someone in Rotherham who has obviously been very, very frustrated about the complete lack of action on grooming gangs for many years. He shouts something along the lines of you let people get away with raping and killing our kids. Right, and they have got to let people get away with raping kids, right? We know that they've covered up for them. There are plenty of reports on grooming gangs to show this. And you might not like the language that he used. He was clearly very angry and whatnot. But to think that he deserved to go to prison and for someone else to be let out, like that bloke you've just showed us, someone who's involved in kidnap and torture, there's just no way that you can justify it. And I feel like that video from Sophie Reaper on GB News there really was just like the cherry on top of all of it.
Yeah, and Sophie Reaper actually saw someone, by the way, escape from the prison who hadn't actually been released. And there had been a massive cock-up. Yeah, they jumped over the barbed wire fence and got out, and the prison didn't actually know who the prisoner was. So it's all gone, like law and order in Britain has totally gone to shit. But I couldn't agree with everything that you said more, Chloe. Well done for saying it. Have either of you got any thoughts on that story before I go to one more story?
Yeah. Look, this really shocked me the other day because I didn't realise there was going to be 2 rounds of prisoner releases. The thing that really got me, Darren, was that these are people who've been locked up for 5 years or more. So these are actually quite dangerous people. And I'm glad that you showed the videos of all their expensive cars there, because that should tell the viewers watching something. It shows that prison will have done nothing to their financial well-being, that the gangs or whatever they're doing behind the bars, or even their friends, their colleagues that have taken over, is still well and good today. So it's actually going to weaken the deterrence even more of going to prison. Now you could be picked up in your Lamborghini when you get out your early prison release day. But it's sickening to me that we have 10,000 foreign criminals in our prisons that we refuse to deport. We refuse to deport, and instead we put British citizens' lives at risk in place of enforcing the law and deporting foreign criminals, illegal people that should not be here.
Yeah. Younes?
Yeah, and this is quite reminiscent because I used to, be a club promoter like 10 to 15 years ago when I was like 20 years old.
Did you have a G-Wagon?
Well, I didn't make that much money back then, but yeah. And there was this rapper called MK24. And one time we booked him for the club, and he came to the club, and he was such a gangster rapper where people were warning about him. I was like, "Go, dude, this guy's trouble. Like, I don't think we should invite him to the club." Anyway, he comes to the club, he performs, and then there's a massive fight that breaks out. Bottles, being thrown, someone gets stabbed, everything. And anyway, he goes to prison, and I think he's the one that actually stabbed someone because he was the one carrying a knife. But then I think they couldn't prove it, and then he only went to prison for like 3 months. Or 6 months, and then he was released. And I was thinking, someone that stabbed at someone else and caused the fight, and insinuated the fight, shouldn't be in prison for 3 months. And when I saw that, I just got reminded of that situation.
Alex mentioned the foreign nationals in our prisons taking up 10,000 spaces. Well, Labour have cottoned on to this. It's only taken them, over 14 years. And they had this to say.
An area where I intend to make progress is in the case of foreign national offenders. I share the public's view that with 10,000 in our prisons, there are far too many foreign offenders in this country, costing £50,000 a year each to house at His Majesty's pleasure. It happens to be my personal view that deportation is as good a punishment as imprisonment, if not better. We are currently on track to remove more foreign national offenders this year than at any time in recent years. But I will now be working with my colleagues across government to explore the ways that we can accelerate this further, including working with the Home Office to make the early removal scheme for foreign offenders more effective.
And then, of course, when the ECHR say that they can't deport a certain national because he's got a right to family life or he's got a right to be in this country for some inane article of this ECHR thing, that, I don't think Winston Churchill, when he was getting round the table with people saying this ECHR thing would be a good idea, had a sort of Albanian drug lord or whatever else in mind as worthy of protection. So the whole thing is a total farce, and if you believe that, you'll swallow anything, as it were, so to speak. That sounds awful. Yeah,
nailed it, Darren.
Right, the final story that I wanted to ask you all about was this one. I don't know if anyone saw it, because the Socialist Worker, the newspaper, tweeted, because there's a few, and the reason I mention it is there's a few people in the comments saying that they're going to Tommy Robinson's latest rally. Now, the Socialist Worker tweeted, as Nazi Tommy Robinson prepares to march in London, we say smash fascists off our street. And they tell people to go to the counter-protest in Piccadilly in London on Saturday. And they say, their front cover says, smash fascists off our streets. And I said, hey, Metropolitan Police, I assume you'll be looking into this as a clear case of incitement to violence. Now, if Tommy Robinson, the shoe was on the other foot, and there was a pro-Palestine protest on our streets, as of course there was week in, week out, and Tommy had said, we need to smash these pro-Palestinians off our streets, you could bet your bottom dollar that he would be accused of inciting violence and that he would be dragged through the police saying that actually he has broken the law. But when it's Tommy, when they say, or even people who are turning up who might not know Tommy Robinson from Adam, but who do find what's going on in our country, everything that we've been discussing on this programme for the last hour and 10 minutes or so, that actually, if you find everything that's going on to not sit well with you, or you don't recognise your country anymore, that you ought to be smashed off our streets? What does that mean? What do you mean by smash? This is very deliberate language. And if the shoe were on the other foot, you can bet your bottom dollar that they would be dragged through the court. Younes?
Yeah, 100%. And I've actually been in contact with Tommy Robinson. I asked him if I can give a speech, and he said yes. So I don't know how much there's truth to that, but there's a very high probability that
good luck, fascist.
Yeah, exactly. So, if I give a speech there, then the next day I might wake up and, people are calling me a fascist, taking my bank account away, the anti-terrorist police turning up at my door trying to arrest me. This is the thing that happens. There was a kid that gave a speech last time at the Tommy Robinson rally, and he was a boxer. And I have him on Instagram. And apparently one of the sponsors that was sponsoring him for the boxing match pulled their sponsorship because he gave a speech at the Tommy Robinson rally. But at the end of the day, we just have to fight fire with fire. We can't cower to these socialists, to these are the fascists. They call us fascists, but I think at the end of the day, it's a projection on their behalf.
Yeah, every fascist throughout history has done this.
I think what's interesting is that fascists anti-fascists, should I say, use fascist tactics, right? Yeah. They use the threat of violence to censor you and scare you. That is the definition of fascism. It's part of the definition. And I always find that really quite baffling. They don't even understand the definition of fascism, yet they throw it around, and it shows the intelligence level of most socialists is pretty close to zero. Will the Met Police act on this? Absolutely not. They definitely won't. And I think there'll be multiple reasons as to why they don't do that. Frankly, let's see how I suspect the protest that takes place on the weekend is going to be extremely peaceful, as it was last time.
Yeah,
that
we
you'll
there,
see
Chloe.
you guys have been there. You were there. You saw it. And I suspect it will be extremely popular, if not more popular than the last one. And the people that cause the trouble will be on their side, will be on the socialist workers' side, holding the same placards you see at every event, whether it's a Gaza event, a BLM event. The socialist workers are there. And I think there should be a broader investigation into who those people are funding those campaigns, because they seem to have a lot of resources. And I think that is going to be the most interesting part, if someone can do some investigative journalism on that.
Yeah, well, there was some investigative journalism done on the Hope Not Hate
there was
Channel 4 documentary yesterday, and that seems like it's really fallen apart really quite quickly. But Lynn comments and says the Unite Trade Union are putting on coaches for Saturday, and Hope Not Hate are also turning up, Chloe. I mean, you'd think the trade unions had nothing bloody better to do. Of course. And we were there. It was perfectly peaceful at the last one. I didn't see anyone kick off. Everyone was just getting together for a common cause. And frankly, I find the smearing of such people to make me utterly sick. And the double standard.
And to have not just some anonymous troll on Twitter call people like the lovely people that we saw at the rally that we went to, Darren, to call them not just an anonymous troll on Twitter, but an actual newspaper to be calling them fascists and thugs, I think is so unprofessional, absolutely vile. And this is why we're now in a world where it's extremely dangerous to have a view that is not in the mainstream, because you just stand up for your country and say we need a bit of basic border control, and you are now a thug and a fascist, right? Yeah, the use of the word smash here, I think that can be flagged to the Met Police as inciting violence, and I really hope that they do something about it, else it's just going to be another case of two-tier policing. But that combine that with the words fascists and thugs, this really is riling people up against Tommy Robinson and whoever else comes to this rally. It's just appalling. It's really sad to see that this is what the left has come to: smash fascists off our streets.
They aren't the left anymore, Chloe.
Because
They're
I
not the
think
left.
there are benefits to immigration of X, Y, and Z. Okay, make a proper bloody argument, not this.
Yeah. Try and win at the ballot box. Yeah, Alex.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I don't call them left anymore. I don't think they have anything left-wing about them. They are completely pro-establishment. They're completely pro-censorship. They're not left-wing. These are authoritarians. They are literally the fascist workers' society. I mean, it's unbelievable how backwards they are now.
Spectre says on YouTube, I binned my union membership because of their nonsense. And honestly, I sympathise with that. I joined a journalistic union and then I left it because I figured that I could give them all the money in China and they wouldn't defend someone like me because I say things that they find utterly reprehensible, because they're all so somewhere to the left of Diane Abbott, and that's pretty left-wing. Now, a reminder...
No, she's so left-wing, she puts 2 left shoes on her feet.
Well, very well said, Chloe. That's a very good one. Reminder to everyone to look, I've got my little poppy on my little pull-up or whatever it's called here. Wear your poppies from tomorrow until, of course, Armistice Day. Now, we'll be back the same time next week. Hopefully, there won't be any tech gremlins or sort of cock-ups from my own incompetence, and will not take you guys over past 9 o'clock, which I do apologise for doing, but we've covered a lot of ground, had a great discussion, and I thank everyone for joining. Please do make sure that you like, subscribe and share, because it helps the channel, helps us grow, and the only way we can be truly independent, as we are, is to actually grow and get to a point where we can fund these people. Because I tell you what, I'm having to fund the salaries of some almighty divas. It's terrible. Alex wants a golden loo installed in his flat. It's getting terrible. But anyway, we'll see you all later. Thanks, guys, for joining.
Thank you. Bye.
I've lost my end screen. I'm saying thanks, guys, for joining. Where's my end screen? There it is. I found it now. Bye. Bye.